Dror, welcome to this evening in London, but also around the world. We have an audience of maybe 270, 280 people from the UK, from the USA, from Canada, and from mainland Europe. First of all, thank you for being with us. It's a joy to see you.
Happy to be here.
I have a few questions for you, and then we will turn to the audience and see what they made of the film and what questions they want to ask you. My first one is, what drew you to make the film? If I can just say two words about me, I saw the film in West Jerusalem in 2013. I was very moved by it, shocked by it. It's quite a harrowing film in places. And the aspect of forgetting morality, which is one of your subheadings, stays with me. The amorality of the situation, of the oppression, if you like. But what drew you to make it? And maybe a second question, what impact at the time, 2012, 2013, did it have in Israel?
Well, first, what drew me to do the movie, as always, there is something which connects to the previous movie. When I did the movie about Sharon and why did this hardliner right-wing prime minister decided to disengage from Gaza, I interviewed a lot of his inner circle. And I think his chief of staff told me that an interview that four heads of Shin Bet gave to the Israeli newspaper, in which in that interview they said that there is no prospect in continuing and maintaining this occupation, had a huge impact on him, on Sharon. And one of the reasons that drew him to disengage from Gaza was that interview that he read. And I remember to myself when I did the interview thinking, wow, if the interview with these four heads of Shin Bet had such an impact on this right-wing politician, maybe if I will bring all the heads of the Shin Bet to speak openly about what they experience and how they see the situation and how they think we should continue, maybe it will change something in Israel and in Israeli politics. That was the goal of doing this movie from the perspective of basically the six heads of the organization which controls or fights the Palestinians' terror, let's call it. And that was the reason. As to your second question, the film had a huge impact in Israel. You cannot really, I mean, it created a huge debate around all the circles of the corridors of power. Regrettably, we are 7 or 8, or now almost 9 years after its release, and the situation only got worse.
No, I agree. I was looking at the figures of this, what you could call a low intensity war, which is still ongoing. Last year, a number, I don't know the number precisely, of Israelis killed, 319 Palestinians, including 88 children. So it's ongoing. Yeah. But I think your film stands the test of time. And what fascinated me was the unanimity of the six, coming from different directions, different characters, different mindsets maybe, but the unanimity of the end of your piece, of your film, where they talked about the need to talk. You've mentioned the Israeli public reaction and the debate at the time. Can I take you to the United States for a second? I'm sure it's been screened in the US. I know it has. Has it had some impact there? Because the US is one of the major players. Your next film is about them, but the human factor. But at the time of the Gatekeepers, did it have an impact in the US?
I know that it did. I heard from people that were very close to President Obama, who saw the film. I know that he saw the film, and he said, I don't understand how a prime minister, after watching the whole top six of the Shin Bet speaking like that, cannot go towards reconciliation with the Palestinians. Unfortunately, he was met by Benjamin Netanyahu as prime minister. And I think we all know that Benjamin Netanyahu, Bibi Netanyahu, did not believe or do not believe in any kind of reconciliation. On the contrary, so it's a Greek tragedy when there is a prime minister who is willing to speak peace. There is other factors that deny that, and when there is Palestinian who is willing to go to peace, there is, I call it the tragedy of the missed clocks, of the mismatched of clocks in time.
Well, I guess my next question is to look at now. There is conversation between Israelis and Palestinians. There is the movement of, not at the political level, but the movement of breaking the silence, B'Tselem, the movements that you know, working at their level, Maxim Watch and others, working at their level. If you look at the political level, there is no fundamental discussion going on.
Yeah.
I was in the UK, in Jerusalem until 2014. I was around when John Kerry made his effort between late 2013 and April 2014, which failed. And if you look at now, there is no conversation about fundamentals between the Palestinian leadership and the Prime Minister of Israel, specifically Mr. Bennett, because he said, I don't want to talk about fundamentals. Benny Gantz has been talking to President Abbas, but about tactics rather than about the realities of the future. So my question really on that is, if you make an assessment of now, as you say, 9 years after the film, not so much where's the hope, but can you looking at where we are now, can you see something that could change the picture and induce conversation?
No, I don't. I have to tell you that I'm much bleaker than I was 9 years ago in terms of the possibility to reach kind of reconciliation between Israelis and Palestinians. I think that the situation, I will first, from my point of view, of course, I will describe what's going on in Israel and then we'll go to the Palestinian, but from the Israeli point of view, the government that is now in place is a kind of anti-Bibi. This is what unites all the participants in this government, anti-Netanyahu. So you have there basically people, the Islamic party with Bennett, with the right wing, extreme right wing. And I think what connects them is basically anti-Bibi. Although I think that this Abbas, who is there in the government, is an amazing attempt to bring the Israeli Arab, the Israeli Palestinian into the government and create kind of maybe a dialogue or with a more pragmatic way of thinking. It's an amazing experiment. I wish it would continue and it will evolve from that. It has a lot of hardships, but and you see a similar or a mirror effect of that. You see also in the Palestinian society. The Palestinian society now is divided between Hamas in Gaza, which, I mean, cancels the right of Israel to exist. Even it doesn't willing to accept the right of Israel to exist, and the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, which is basically living under Israeli or through Israel's military. I don't know what will happen if there will be free election in the West Bank. It seems that Hamas will win there as well. I think that the Palestinian Authority is governing there by force of the Israeli army. And again, in order to reach some kind of, I think part of what I got in my other film, where Gamal Halal, who was one of the chief negotiator, and one of them said there, we have to take the word peace from the lexicon for now, because we cannot really, peace will not come in the near future. There is no kind of, the leaders on both sides cannot carry the burden of what needed, the kind of decision that needs to be made in order to reach peace. So the only hope which I can see now is trying really to build from the bottom up. I don't believe that it will happen, but reconciliation starts with people that are speaking to each other, understanding each other in a way what kind of Avraham Shalom said in the movie, in the Gatekeepers. I see that you don't eat glass and you see that I don't drink petrol. This is kind of the way I think there is a chance to reconcile something there.
Yeah. If I can say a brief word about the Balfour project thinking. We concentrate more on us, on the Brits, on our past, and on our ability to influence the future. We do, as the charity, feel a sense of responsibility, and we want our government to assume that responsibility. I'm not personally particularly interested in apologies for the past. That's a waste of time. But the idea of contributing internationally to an outcome, to a development, to an improvement, is what keeps the charity going. Mm-hmm. Can you say a word about the international scene, the potential for influence, pressure, call it what you will, on the government of Israel, but maybe also on the PLO, to move? My own opinion is that the PLO has difficulty in shifting from its fundamental positions, the acceptance of 78% of Mandate Palestine as Israel back in 88 and 93. So I think the PLO has got little to give in the way of concessions. But what do you see in terms of the prospects or the possibility of the mindset in Israel being changed by international opinion?
My view on that is there is one country that can do that, and that's the United States. But what I see coming from the United States now is a disengagement from the Middle East, more and more. What President Biden has done in Afghanistan, and all his rhetoric is he wants to disengage from the Middle East. America has had enough of the Middle East, I think, to last for centuries, and they are moving their eyes to somewhere else. But as Dennis Ross, the chief negotiator, said to Jim Baker, the Secretary of State, you think that you can ignore the Middle East, but it won't ignore you. It will pose itself on you. So maybe you should try to do something in order to solve the problem. The only power that can influence the Israeli prime minister or the Israeli public is America. And if America has the power, America has the power to influence. It didn't use it for its own reason, probably most of it eternally. And also, as Henry Kissinger once said, Israel doesn't have a foreign policy share. It has only interior policy, which means you deal only with politics inside Israel. And basically, this is what's going on. The leaders, I mean, as I said, you need outstanding leaders like de Klerk and Mandela in South Africa, who managed to rise up and create a different future for their residents or for their civilians. In the Middle East, the two brave leaders that tried to do that regarding each other were Anwar Sadat, who was assassinated in Egypt, and Yitzhak Rabin, who was assassinated also in Israel. So sadly, it's a tragedy. At the end of the day, it's a tragedy.
Thank you. Thank you. I may come back at the end of our session to conclude. In fact, I will. But I wonder whether I can now turn to Diana to take us through some of the questions that are coming your way, Dror, and if there's anything for me, I'm happy to chip in. But maybe we can start with some questions for Dror from the audience. Thank you.
There are questions. Hello, everyone. There are questions for both of you. But I want to start with a question about the film itself from Carmel George. Dror, she's asking, how is it possible to get all of the amazing footage that you found in the film?
Well, some of the footage are animated CGI. Some of it are stills picture that are true. Well, with a lot of patience and a good archive researcher who worked intensely for 3 years, we got the archive material for the film. It was a long journey. But one anecdote, I will give you one anecdote. When I wanted archive from the IDF, they wanted to approve everything. So I did not allow them to approve what kind of use. So a lot of the kind of what you saw, the drones, is really recreated imagery, which we created in order to serve the film and the story.
Well, thank you for that. Following up on that, Marcus Hallside has asked if you'd be if you thought it was possible to have made a similar film today.
Look, the film had a huge impact on the security apparatus in Israel. I mean, not every day you see six heads of one of the toughest organization in Israeli security speaking. I think, yes, I think it would be, it's definitely possible. And by the way, I wanted to mention if you ask, what is the absurd here, that if you ask, I would say almost 95% of the chief of the highest ranks of the Israeli security apparatus, whether it's army, Mossad, or Shin Bet, all of them are for peace and reconciliation with the Palestinian and believe that this is the only way for Israel to move forward.
Can I just chip in there, Dee, just to say that I'm interested in an organization which embodies perhaps those people. It's called Commanders for Israel's Security. So it bases itself, it's an Israeli ex-commander organization, NGO. It bases itself on the security and the future of Israel. That's, I guess, natural. But it sees that in order to safeguard the future of Israel, there needs to be an outcome, a peaceful, just, inshallah, outcome to the, I was going to say conflict, but it's not. That's not a good word for this tragedy that you mentioned, Dror. And it takes us back to that point about the disconnect between the practitioners of security in Israel and the practitioners of politics in Israel. You've already covered it in a sense, but I just wanted to come back to it because it's so striking that these guys, mainly guys who've been leading military activity on behalf of Israel, see something that the politicians don't want to see.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's the pragmatism of dealing with war and understanding the casualties and understanding the price of war. And basically, politicians, allow me to say, they care only about their skin. I haven't found really any aspiring politicians really after the Rabin assassination in Israel. I didn't see any kind of really someone who rose to that kind of level of a leader, I would call it. Mostly politicians, not leaders.
Yeah, thank you. Back to you, Dee.
Well, following on from one of your comments, Dror, we've got Baroness Jenny Tong, who was watching, and she commented that she really struggled watching that film. It is a very difficult film to watch. And she asks, are Shin Bet sincere in their wish to talk to the Palestinians, or is that just talk?
Well, they do that all the time. Shin Bet is speaking to the Palestinian, Shin Bet is the connection between the Palestinians authorities and the Israelis, the one who speak to the Palestinians all the time. The head of Shin Bet is a frequent guest in Abu Mazen's halls in Ramallah. They are the ones that are dealing with the Palestinians all the time. And if there is someone, part of the reason that I did this movie is that they are the expert, the Israeli expert. You cannot, if they say what they say, you cannot diffuse what they say. They are the ones that are the experts in understanding the Palestinian society, speaking about the Palestinian society. So when the film was screened, I had a lot of, from the Prime Minister down, a lot of claims that I kind of cherry-picked their words in order to serve my purpose, but they all came and said, no, it is what we think. This is what we think about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So yes, absolutely, they are the one.
Thanks for that. You're touching on my next question from Helen Kinloch. Has the film been viewed in Israel, and how was it received there?
As I said, it was viewed in Israel. I think it was the most successful documentary film ever in the history of Israel. A lot of people watched it, more than 100,000, which is a huge number in Israel for a documentary film. It created a huge debate, a lot of pro and cons about the movie. Also in the political arena, it created a huge debate. It had its impact. One of the nicest moments I had, at least at one of the screenings, where after the screening, 3 settlers came to me after the screening and said that the movie touched them deeply, and they are reconsidering where they live and what it causes to the other side. So it really kind of moved me that it touched them in that way and maybe changed something. But you know, we are, as director or as artists, we are limited in our influence, especially now when you have the social media and there's kind of loudspeakers that the government has in order to bring its message to the Israeli public. And that message in the last 7 years, since the movie has been out, especially with Bibi Netanyahu, was no way. I'm not, you know, demonizing the Palestinian Authority and creating almost a no way out situation.
Well, I would say don't underestimate the power of your film. It was definitely very moving. So
thank you very much.
I have a question now for Vincent from Saad Al Ismail. Question for Sir Vincent Fien. Would you agree that the Israeli lobby in the UK is the main obstacle for the Balfour Project? Or what do you believe is the main obstacle?
There is an Israeli lobby. There's a Palestinian lobby, but it is a bit less united and less well-funded and less heard. I think the main obstacle for the Balfour Project is our scale. We are small. We're a newish charity, quite small. We're trying to grow, particularly in terms of outreach to subscribers, to people who want to watch the webinars that I mentioned at the beginning, want to watch tonight, and so on. We want to reach universities. We want to reach secondary schools, increase the coverage and the debate on Israel-Palestine in our schools, as well as at university level. But the key is, I think, political leadership. There, currently, and maybe for several years past, we have the following problem. Our government, which, as I said at the beginning, has a certain responsibility to be active on this issue for the benefit of all, primarily for Palestinians, because the Palestinians are the people under occupation, but also for the future well-being of Israel, to be more assertive, to be more active, to be more engaged than our governments have chosen to be. There are many reasons for that. The Israeli lobby is part of it, but not the whole. There are many reasons for that. One is inertia, the thought that if this issue, as Dror has been saying, is not going to get better anytime soon, why spend political capital on it? That's a political measure, a political judgment. But what I find a challenge, and I want to challenge it, is the thought that the UK drafted a lot of the international laws which the occupation breaches. The occupation breaches through settlement construction, contrary to the Fourth Geneva Convention, etc. And in our present situation, post-Brexit, I believe that the UK as a country needs international law more than ever before. It needs the rule of law. It needs the rule of law in the WTO. It needs the rule of law across the piece. And you can't be selective about the rule of law. If you believe in the rule of law, then it has to be implemented with your friends as well as with your foes. And what I find disturbing is that our present government is focused heavily, post-Brexit again, on trade deals, including with Israel, and is less interested than I want it to be in upholding human rights through international law, which was mentioned several times in the film by Shin Bet heads as something that they thought deserved respect and was in a sense, a constraint on their actions, but a constraint that at least some of them wanted to have. So those are my swift responses to Saeed. There's more to say, but we're here mainly to listen to Dror and not to me. So I'll go back to you, Dee.
Thank you. So we've got a question from Antoine Rafoul. He asks if you know if there has been any changes in Israel's targeted assassination policy since you made the film. And I guess that could go to either of you, or both of you.
Israel, at least from what I know, on the day-to-day basis, doesn't target assassinate anymore. I think when there is conflicts in Gaza, probably they use that tool only during the conflicts but I don't think to the best of my knowledge, they don't practice anymore targeted assassination.
I don't know the answer to the question. I do recall that back in, I think, the time of David Miliband as Foreign Secretary, so that must have been the Blair administration or the Brown administration. There was an incident where Mossad, it must have been, used agents using British passports to conduct a targeted assassination in a third country in the Arab world, I think.
Oh.
And that caused a big, as you would imagine, a big row, because the use by an ally of your country's passports to conduct a killing is not what friends do. But I can't answer the question directly. I'm not aware of policy change, but I'm not following that issue closely.
Thank you both. So we've got a question from Sandra Hamrouni. Don't we need to update our understanding of Hamas? Surely they changed their rhetoric 10 years ago, and they have said that Israel shouldn't have been created, but it's a fact on the ground and Hamas do recognize it. No one listens to them or speaks with them, which even Shin Bet said should happen. So how can people understand their viewpoint?
Mm-hmm. Dror, do you want to go first on that one?
Oh.
Okay, then I will. I used to be a diplomat, and diplomats talk. And one of the 6 Shin Bet guys, the guy with the check shirt, said, I'll talk to anybody. We should talk to anybody, including Ahmadinejad, the then leader of Iran. I tend to agree with him. I think it's important to engage. One might seek to engage to change the policy of the person that you're talking to. I think that's a legitimate reason to engage. On Hamas and what it thinks, in my time as a diplomat, I was forbidden by the government, by law, if you like, to engage with Hamas. I did go into Gaza from Jerusalem, which entails passing through a Hamas passport checkpoint, but no engagement with Hamas senior officials. That's still the case. More recently, our government has proscribed Hamas. It had in the past proscribed the military wing. Recently, about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, it proscribed the entirety of Hamas. And that was a decision noted through the House of Commons. It creates problems for those who do wish to engage and change Hamas, or to address Sandra's point, to assess what Hamas thinks, which can be hard to define, but to find out what Hamas really thinks about the future. And the other set of people that it affects are the humanitarians, those who act charitably in Gaza to try to keep alive and functioning an economy of 2 million people under lockdown since 2008. So those people who are trying to deliver medical assistance and other forms of assistance, including UNRWA, including the UNDP, including several UK charities, the constraint of this proscription on the UK charities is very hard to measure, but I'm hoping, and it's a hope, that the British government will clarify to say that the humanitarian and political engagement with Hamas that I've tried to describe, the attempt to engage with Hamas to bring it to a peaceful position, and to engage with 2 million Gazans to help to keep them alive, that those elements of activity will be seen to be benign, because they are.
I will add to that just one sentence, which I will reiterate what the head of the Shin Bet said. If someone is willing to speak with me, I would speak with anybody, and I would not exclude anybody from speaking. If they don't want to speak with me, then I have no choice. But if they are willing to speak, I would speak to anybody, and that's the only way to reconciliation. Yeah.
I'll just add one sentence to your sentence, which is naturally, Israel talks to Hamas all the time.
Yeah.
Not necessarily at the level of, Naftali Bennett, but the communication between Hamas and Israel is close.
Yeah. By the way, Benjamin Netanyahu was a great hero. His goal was to downplay or to completely destroy the reputation of Abu Mazen, who is willing to speak with Israel. And he negotiated and gave money to Hamas throughout the years. So basically, what his politics is to completely destroy the Palestinian Authority and make it really reliable for the Israeli public, while he was negotiating with Hamas all the time, or was conducting definitely relations with Hamas all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I'll stop swapping sentences. Back to you, Dee.
This question is from Diana Safier. So both of you have mentioned that it will take an outside influence to help move the peace talks along and hopefully end the occupation. And I just wondered if both of you could tell me your thoughts on what would make the US take that step to use their influence.
Look, I mean, there is change in America. There is change. The progressive part of the Democratic Party is moving. You see there is a change or shift in the public opinion towards Israel and towards the occupation, for sure. We hear it I hear it all the time from diplomats, and we read a lot of articles about that in the paper. Biden is a representative of the old administration or the old kind of people from the Democratic Party, but it will change. I mean, it's moving. America is a complicated country with these two parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, but definitely in the Democratic Party, you see a change. And only politicians, at the end of the day, the politicians have the power to change. Only them. I mean, of course, they are following their voters and that, but it has to come from the politician area.
If I can just add, I'm not an expert on the USA. If I can just add one thought on Europe. The ability of European members of parliament, national parliaments, to come together and to try to influence their governments is growing. It's growing on this issue. There is tomorrow a meeting of what's called the European Parliamentarians for Israeli-Palestinian Equality, a group who believe in European countries recognizing the state of Palestine on pre-June 67 borders and on equality and implementation of international law. What unites them is a sense that the status quo is, first of all, unbearable for Palestinians, which is, I think, the message that came through your film, Dror. And secondly, that Europe can play a part. I agree with you, Dror, that the USA is the key player, but Europe politically on this issue is rather divided. The countries that Benjamin Netanyahu has spent a lot of time cultivating, like Hungary, Czech Republic, Poland, Romania, Greece, are in one camp. And then you have the Nordics, you have Ireland, Spain to a certain extent, France on a good day in another camp. Macron is a bit hard to tell. But what I'm trying to say on that is that the European Union as an entity has difficulty in taking any position other than repeating itself. It can repeat what it said before, but it is not active. It is not assertive on this issue. And it is the biggest trading partner of Israel by far. So there are levers that could be used if leverage was agreed politically. So I come back to your point about the politicians. Coming on to America very briefly. I'm not an expert, but I am told that the Jewish community, which is obviously diverse in the USA, that the younger members of the Jewish community in the USA don't like settlements, don't like the occupation, don't like the image that this gives to Israel, a country to which they feel very close ties. It's the wrong image, it's the wrong message for Israel to be giving to young American Jews. And I just echo what you said about the liberal wing, if you like, of the Democrat Party. It seems to be growing in strength. Bernie Sanders didn't make it as the presidential candidate, but he hasn't gone away, and he still has influence within the party. I also agree with you on Biden. Biden seems to be a manager of this issue rather than a person who attempts to resolve it. So if that remains the case, we're on a slow trajectory towards progress rather than a quick one. And if there's one thing I've learned after 3 years in Jerusalem, I went thinking, first of all, that I could make a difference, which was pretty big-headed of me. And secondly, that a difference could be made in 3 years. I think the trajectory is long. I once spoke to a guy from Breaking the Silence who said, the settler project is going to fail. And I said, very excitedly, can it do it in 3 years, please, while I'm here? He said, no, give it 30, give it 30. But I want to believe that that's possible. I want to believe that that's possible.
I think, look, I think at the end of the day, outer forces can produce some kind of outcome. But at the end of the day, it's the two parties on the ground which have to take those tough decisions. And the story now is whether is there really a two-state solution existing anymore, or is it a one-state solution with equal rights to everybody? I don't know, but it has to come from the people on the ground. I mean, if the Israelis, the majority of the Israelis will not believe that they can trust the Palestinians in providing them security, as they say, that they will suffer, again, terrorist attack. And if the Palestinian will not believe that they will have equal rights and to define themselves, nothing will move on the ground. And you know, one of the gatekeepers said in one of the interviews, which I did not include it, regrettably, the trust in the peace process was much higher at the beginning in 1993 when Rabin started the Oslo Accords with Yasser Arafat than when they reached Camp David. When they reached Camp David, it was almost ruined. There was no trust between the sides. So, and there is extremist parties in both sides which would love to hinder so that's why I'm in Berlin now.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, we've got a question from Ian Macaulay, who's asked me if I can give him details on how to do a screening of the Gatekeepers in Fife. So that's very exciting. We would love for more people to see this film. It's a very important film. So yes, please do. I'll put my email in the chat box. If anyone has any questions on how to do the screening, I'll put you in touch with Dror's people. So hopefully we can have far more screenings around. I'm going to end with my final question, which is one to hopefully end on a positive note, because I feel like I might have nightmares otherwise tonight. From Peter Lippiet, what are the signs of hope?
Shall I go first? Because yes, I think
I have to search hard for that. So I hope after you finish, I'll manage to find some.
Because we talked about it on Monday, and on Monday he was less hopeful than I hope he will be tonight. But from me, let's start at home. Let's start at home. I said the charity looks to ourselves, looks at Britain, Britain's past, Britain's current influence. We do have influence, we don't exert it, but we have it. And the future. Young people, I'm generalizing, but young people who know about this story care about this story, and they want it to change. They want to see equality. They want to see respect for the law. So young people are a force for good, in my general opinion, and on this issue, definitely. There is a body of political opinion across the parties, less vocal in the Conservative Party, but across the political parties in the UK, which does not regard this as a partisan issue, not a left-right issue, but a rights issue. They are to be encouraged, they are to be stimulated, indeed. And people joining us today in the UK can help to stimulate them by writing to their MP, by doing the democratic things that we're taught. But they do have some impact. They have incremental impact. And I think that my last source of hope is the people. I'm not as familiar with the people of Israel as I was with the Palestinians, because my job was talking to Palestinians in Jerusalem, Gaza, and the rest of the West Bank. But people can change, and people can reconcile. Takes us back perhaps to your grassroots thought, Dror, but people can reconcile. I agree also with Dror that one needs political impetus to change policy, a political impetus to change policy. And if that comes from the outside, if it comes from the US, if it comes from Europe, I think that can be effective. And I would hope that I would just hope that the next generation or the one after that of Israelis don't need to send their sons and daughters to conscription, don't need to do that, don't feel the need to do that in order to protect the state. I'll stop there.
You know, I gave a speech in 2013 at J Street Annual, which is a Jewish organization in America who supports peace vehemently. And I said that what happened to me while doing the movie is watching the young soldiers of Israel in 1967 walking the Kasbahs of Nablus, of Hebron, or Gaza, and seeing those kind of images again and again and again, the same kind of young soldiers moving on. And it was before my son entered the Israeli army. Gladly, he wasn't there. He didn't have to do this kind of work. But if there is a point of hope, I think it lies on the human nature. And the human nature, although it's maybe big words to speak now, but human nature, what people want is to live peacefully and not to be in a troubled zone where they have to worry about the next day, what will happen to their families, what will happen to their loved ones. And at the end of the day, I think if there will come leaders on both sides that will really, really mean peace and understand that peace is necessary, and that reconciliation between the Palestinian dream and the Israeli or the Jewish dream, both of them want to have a homeland in the same land, will have to somehow reconcile. I hope that this day will come. I don't have a lot of hope that it will come in the next future, in the near future, because I don't see, as I said, leaders on both sides that can carry that weight. And yeah, maybe young people will learn that, will understand that this cannot continue. This horrible situation which exists in the Holy Land cannot continue for long.
Thank you very much, Dror. Dee, if I can just conclude swiftly, and then turn back to you just to end the session. First of all, I'd like to thank Dror for his time and courtesy today in answering every question honestly. I'd like to make a pitch that in the future we might invite you back to comment on the human factor, maybe later this year if you have the time. you'd be very
I would
welcome.
love, it will be an honor.
Thank you very much. You are kind. And just to conclude by saying that the Balfour Project does what it can to keep space for sensible discussion of a tragedy of oppression, of occupation, call it what you will, but of this tragedy. We are trying to keep attention in the UK and wherever we can reach to this tragedy and saying it shouldn't continue. It's not right that it should continue. And there must be a better way. Very simple. We're trying to do that. I'll just repeat briefly what we're up to in the coming weeks. On the 25th, we're talking about the plight of Palestinians in Lebanon, who are in limbo, not allowed to work, stuck since 48 or 67, generation after generation in horrible conditions in the camps. And we will have two speakers who understand that and can talk about it on the 25th. And then on the 1st of February, one of the 6 NGOs designated by Mr. Gantz and backed by the Israeli government as terrorist, which is frankly nonsense, Al-Haq, talking to us about what they do and the impact of this designation upon their ability to speak for Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza. Those are our next two things. Later in the year, we will be holding a conference on the end of the mandate and its legacy, and on the situation today and on what Britain can do today to engage, as I said at the beginning, to engage, to influence, to make its voice heard for reason, what I call reason. And on that note, I'd like to thank you again, Dror. Thank you for being there.
Thank you for
honoring us with your presence. I mean that.
Having me.
As the Arabs would say, sharaftuna. And to wish you well.
Shukran alaikum. Salamu alaikum.
Shukran jazilan. We wish you well. Thanks to all who have stayed with us. Thanks to all who have contributed their questions. There are more questions than we had time to answer, but we will now share in the chat. Dee will share with Dror and me what came through in terms of comment as well as questions, and we will digest that. So thank you for being with us tonight. Stay with us if you can for future events. We would much appreciate that because you can make a difference. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.